Depth was an issue for this Reds team before they started trading players away. Now, with Luis Castillo, Jose Barrero, and Lucas Sims all due to miss the season opener, the question must be asked, what sort of team will even be on the field for the Cincinnati Reds?
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are free and available on all platforms. I'm Stephen Offenbaker alongside Jeff Carr, and we have a passion for baseball, and we have a passion for the Cincinnati Reds. And we've taken that passion and we've turned it into information for you. On today's podcast, Jeff and I are going to discuss how the Reds can best adjust to the injuries that are starting to take their toll out in Goodyear. Today, we learned that Luis Castillo may not be ready to start opening day or even the beginning of the season. And Jeff, we spent yesterday's podcast talking a little bit about what this starting rotation could look like. And now with the injury to Luis Castillo, and let's be clear, they're just calling it a bit of a sore shoulder. They're not saying it's anything major. They're very much downplaying it. But the fact remains that he may not be ready. And with that revelation today, it really forces us to rethink what this starting rotation will look like heading into the beginning of 2022.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest with you, one thing that kind of gives me pause about this is that if you ask David Bell about the health of a player, he is always going to err on the side of optimism. He's going to give you that short timetable, and that kind of has me a little bit worried here. Not to say that I think Luis Castillo is due to miss a lot of time, but I got the feeling, based on some folks who I talked to, he's going to miss more than one start. We're talking about maybe like 2 or 3 starts into the year. So yes, this starting rotation is not going to look like the one that we had penned down even just 24 hours ago. And we're talking about Tyler Mahle on opening day for sure down in Atlanta, which makes me wonder who fills in behind him. We saw Vladimir Gutierrez on the mound for all of 3 outs on yesterday's spring training game. It was interesting how David Bell kind of segmented that. It was a new pitcher every inning. But maybe that means that Goody's further along. I'm not really sure. But when you look at this rotation now, you move out Castillo for at least, I would probably say, 3 starts. So who does that leave in his place? Because I would like to say it's Nick Lodolo, but I don't know that that's going to be the case.
Well, it definitely creates an interesting situation in the back end of this rotation. And I also found the pitcher usage today a little interesting, especially when you compare it to Buehler for the Dodgers, who went out and threw a little over 4 innings. So I think that we're faced with a situation with these pitchers coming into camp where some of them have maybe done a little bit more prep work than others. And that's really going to become a factor as we get closer and closer to opening day. As far as how this rotation can look, I think you absolutely are correct that Tyler Mahle will be your opening day starter down in Atlanta. And then I think that just for the sake of filling this thing out, Gutierrez moves from 3 to 2. He becomes your second guy. I think Mike Minor slots in as the number 3 starter. And we're really talking about what it is they will do with the 4th and 5th spots in the rotation. We've said all along that we believe Hunter Greene will make this team out of Goodyear and he will be in the starting rotation. So it creates an interesting situation where do you think the Reds will slot him into the rotation in such a way that he will make his major league debut at the home opener against the Cleveland Guardians? Because we've already heard little birdies around Cincinnati saying that opening day was probably not going to be a sellout. And I think if Hunter Greene is making his major league debut in that home opener, it will in fact be a sellout.
I believe so. And in fact, if the Reds really want to do any amount of saving face, because at this point, it's kind of out the window when you're talking about that sort of action. But if they want to do any amount of that, you're going to start Hunter Greene on April 12th. You're not going to start him in Atlanta for game 4 of that series. Look, that series is going to be kind of rough anyway. I kind of feel like Atlanta's just going to continue to roll from their World Series championship from a year ago, and they're rolling over a team that just has decided to not compete. Whatever they want to tell us, we're not competing, because the depth issue has always been there. Since basically the middle of last season. In fact, you could kind of argue that it was a thing last year as well. And now they've gutted the roster, and now there's injuries that are plaguing it. So all total, we're looking at a starting rotation that has been decimated based from last year's squad. And is Reiver Sanmartin or is Nick Lodolo going to get some starts? That's going to be a tough one for me to call. But if Hunter Greene isn't getting starts, I'm going to need an explanation, because he should 100% be in this rotation. And the best way to make that happen is April 12th at home against the Guardians.
Well, and I think to your point with Nick Lodolo, the other factor here that is going to be a factor, and it shouldn't be a factor, but it will be, is when do the Reds want to start Nick Lodolo's service time clock? Now, with Reiver Sanmartin, he pitched last season. His clock's running. So having him as the 5th pitcher, or the 4th pitcher in this case, to get Hunter Greene debuting at home really doesn't have a financial impact to the team. Whereas if you start Nick Lodolo's clock sooner than later, it eventually catches up with them. So I'm curious, because of all of the pitchers we've talked about, Nick Lodolo is in the best position to go and take a rotation spot. He's been in Goodyear for weeks now. He's ready. He's stretched out. He is good to go. And he has looked very good in the limited amount of pitches we've seen him throw. So for me, if it's a sheer competition question, if it's a sheer most likely to be successful question, I think Nick Lodolo has to be your guy. But you and I both know that the Reds don't necessarily operate that way.
Right. And the whole talking point these last couple of years were, well, if they consider themselves a bona fide contender, a bona fide playoff team, they got to start on day one. They got to have the 26 best players on the roster up for opening day. Now it's just, if they consider themselves a team that's going to play 9 innings with the other competitive baseball team, they should probably have their best 26 players. And now we found out yesterday, it's official. It's getting expanded to 28. So not only are the Reds experiencing injury problems to a roster that was already shallow, but now they got to add 2 more players. And it's something that we'll talk about over the course of this episode, Steve. But if we're being honest, I think at least 10 spots should be up for grabs. But I think it's more only like, about 6 spots are up for grabs. But by up for grabs, I don't necessarily mean, there's a ton of great top prospects that are ready to take the reins. Nah, it's more like non-roster invitees who are trying to resurrect their careers in some form or fashion. I wonder what we're going to see in these 28 players, but when it comes to the 5 guys that are starting in this rotation, that I think we've already kind of pushed away the idea of a 6-man rotation, at least to start the year. It's going to be interesting to see what's more important to the Reds, because as we kind of found out this offseason, money is what they focus on first.
It is. And sadly, just a few weeks ago, Jeff, the starting rotation was what we talked about being the team strength. And it's fast becoming the biggest question mark.
Really is. And unfortunately, this is a team that has a lot of question marks. But, the injury bug hasn't been confined to pitchers. The position players are also working to overcome injuries and build up their strength. If you want to build your strength, order a Built Bar today. I'm talking about the amazing 100% real chocolate covered Built Bar. They've got all the amazing flavors like cherry barcia, coconut, marshmallow that I have just tried out of a puff box. You have got to get yourself some Built Bar. The puffs are amazing. Plus, they've got a new one, brownie batter puff. That's right. If that just made your mouth water, go to Built.com. And you can use the promo code LOCKED15 to save 15% off that mouth-watering idea of a treat, brownie batter puff. Because we're talking about Built Bar that has, on average, about 130 calories per bar and up to 18 grams of protein. per bar. This is the snack that will take your diet to the major leagues, because we all get to that period of our diets where we're just like, I need a snack. I need some chocolate. Built Bar fits into all of those categories just fine. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 to save 15% off your next order. Make sure to give Locked On MLB Prospects a listen after today's podcast. Lindsey Crosby is a minor league encyclopedia and will keep you up to date on all the up-and-coming players, as well as keep you up to date on some college baseball. The Locked On MLB Prospects podcast, just like Locked On Reds, is free and available on all platforms. And make sure you're following us on Twitter. You can follow me at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs, and you can follow Steve at S. Offenbaker. You can also follow the podcast at Locked On Reds and subscribe on YouTube today. Steve, we talked about the starting rotation. The infield and the outfield, though, have to be talked about because we've already pointed out the fact that the outfield is made up of a bunch of dudes who are probably fourth outfielders. And let's be honest, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I know this, but Nick Senzel's looked all right this spring, and he looks like he's bulked up a little bit. He's a little bit healthier. If he can stay on the field, then maybe at least one of the 3 outfield spots are spoken for. Again, there's 2 more spots they got to figure out. But there were also some scares today of Mike Moustakas trying to dive for a ground ball. Lord knows why on earth he felt the need to do that in a spring training game. And it looked like he kind of tweaked his shoulder a little bit. They pulled him out of the game. Reports after the game were that he is fine. He's good. He's not going to miss any time. Donovan Solano was also hit by a ball in the rib cage, at least in the side. Didn't really look like it hit him square in the ribs or whatever, but he was pulled out of the game for precautionary reasons. He is fine as well. But again, this brings into question the depth of both the infield and the outfield, because it's not a whole lot there.
There's not. And I think, first of all, watching Mike Moustakas in the field today, clearly the Moose should not be on the loose when it comes to playing the field. I think that the Reds need to take advantage of this designated hitter, and Mike just needs to bat for a while. He definitely, I think his best fielding days are behind him. And for the Reds to get the most out of what he has left in the tank, I think it probably comes from him being the designated hitter. Again, with Solano, I believe that was just purely precautionary. I think a regular season game, he probably doesn't come out, but it really truly raises some depth questions, because I think after those 2 guys, we're talking about Max Strock and then a question of scooting people around. And while I know that David Bell is a fan of the tinkering and the moving and the adjusting, the outfield, as you mentioned, is already going to require a lot of probably what should be infielders getting time out there. And if you run into a situation where you've already got an infielder playing outfield and then you end up with a couple freak injuries on the infield, there's real problems for this team. Also, you mentioned Nick Senzel, and I want to put a little bit in perspective. He's 4 for 9 on the spring, but he does look good. And if he can be healthy, there is nobody pulling for him more out there than I am. I really want him to be successful. But the depth amongst the position players is starting to become a real concern, especially for a team whose starting lineup now is probably questionable, I think we would call it. And if you start subtracting from that, there's real problems for this team.
I think when you look at the lineup, and we kind of talked about this last week, but India leading off, Joey Votto, 2 or 3, whatever. If he's hitting in the 2 hole, if he's hitting in the 3 hole, Mike Moustakas against right-handed pitchers and Tyler Naquin against right-handed pitchers. Tyler Stevenson. No idea outside of that. And
it's going to be difficult.
Yeah. And when you're talking about left-handed pitchers, Kyle Farmer, sure. In fact, Kyle Farmer hit a bomb today. That was kind of nice to see. And then Donovan Solano hits really well against left-handed pitchers. But again, so David Bell loves to tinker because he loves to strategize. He loves to kind of figure out, it's like a game of chess to him. This isn't a game of chess. This is a game of let's make sure the boat doesn't sink. Let's patch all the holes as the water keeps coming in. He's sitting there. It's not even whack-a-mole. It's like, Titanic if he's trying to put a piece of gum on all the different leaks or something. I don't know, because you're looking at guys like Colin Moran. Like Colin Moran came in as a non-roster invitee. Now we're talking about him making the opening day roster, which they would have to make some kind of corresponding 40-man roster move. Probably when Jose Barrero goes on the injured list, one of these non-roster invitees are going to get added. They just signed a guy named Brandon Drury, who's a utility infielder who has about 100 points of batting average higher than you or me. And then for his career. And there's some other guys that you're just like, I don't know. And you're going to really put a lot more on Alejo Lopez, on Max Schrock, on just these dudes who a little bit at the end of last year were okay, but we're asking a lot out of some guys that are still big question marks. And I know we've talked about this already, but Aristides Aquino, yeah, you can bet on regular playing time for
clearly
this dude.
he is what they're going to do against left-handed pitchers. He's going to start against left-handed pitchers in right field. It's going to be his spot. There's nobody else out there right now to really take it away from him. The youngsters in the minor leagues aren't going to be ready to do that this year, maybe next year. So I really think they're looking at Aquino and seeing a 1 to 2 year bridge guy that's not going to cost them any money until they can get someone like Reese Hines up here to play right field.
No, I agree. And it's funny to think about. Last year, we looked at this roster and we said, boy, is there room for Aquino? Does he get non-tendered? And now it's like, what else you got?
He's starting, my friend. He's a starter.
He's starting.
He's a starter.
And for those of us that are still on the train, okay, it's not even really a train anymore. I think it's like a cart, one of those hand carts going down the tracks of, can somebody give Shogo Akiyama some playing time? I think he's going to get it just by default because there's really nobody else to give it to. That's where we are in the depth situation. Shogo Akiyama is probably going to get a lot of time this year.
Well, it's unfortunate that that's how it's going to play out, because I think Shogo's one injury away from being a starter as well. I mean,
yeah.
The outfield is scary. You and I have been talking about it for weeks now. It's certainly not gotten any better, and I really just don't see the Reds going out making any moves to address that situation. My only hope in the back of my mind is that as we get closer to the end of camp, there will be some interesting waiver claims available out there, and maybe, just maybe, they'll get somebody that can hit lefties a little bit that they can bring in for a team-friendly contract. I think that's really the only hope that the Reds have of addressing the outfield prior to the start of 2022.
And let's hope the long-haired brothers of TJ Friedel and Jake Fraley can do some raking, because otherwise it's going to be Nick Senzel and a bunch of dudes striking out.
For sure. Well, the Reds did go out and make a move with the pitching staff, and it made the pitching staff just a little bit better if you squint with this free agent signing. So coming up, Jeff and I are going to talk about the bullpen. But first, I want to give a shout out to Athletic Greens for sponsoring today's podcast. Their flagship product called A1G helps boost your metabolism. It helps give you better sleep, and it overall just makes you feel better. So you're probably asking yourself, what exactly is this stuff? It is a 1 scoop of delicious AG1. You're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food-sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, your focus, and it helps you fight off aging just a little bit. It does all of the things. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews. It's recommended by professional athletes and is trusted by leading health experts. It's cheaper than getting all of the different supplements yourselves, and you're investing in just an all-in-one nutritional insurance policy, so to speak. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially heading into the cold and flu season that's upon us right now. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills or supplements and all of this stuff that's supposed to look out for your health but doesn't. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/MLB network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/MLB MLB Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Thanks again for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day. Make sure you're following the podcast on all platforms, including YouTube. Head over there and hit that subscribe button today. Lots of great content coming for you all through the 2022 baseball season. We've got to talk about the bullpen, Jeff. The Reds went out today and signed Hunter Strickland. He's a right-hander who spent last season with the Milwaukee Brewers, so it's a pitcher that the Reds know a little bit. I think this is a decent signing. It doesn't, I think your reply to me was it doesn't move the needle a whole lot, but in a season that's going to see pitchers' arms taxed to the max, in a season that's going to see the beginning opening day roster at 28 with extra pitchers involved to help get them through the month of April, I think it's more important now than ever to go out and get a signing like this. Somebody that has had some success within this division that you can at least count on to go out and not get bombed every single time they hit the mound.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about this off air. At least he's better than Heath Hembree. I also thought about this. I think he's better than Sean Doolittle, and that means that he's the best bullpen signing that the Reds have had in the last 3 years. That's kind of sad. I think that overall he slots in as a nice mid guy. Everybody, and I tweeted about this, you're immediately going to see that last year he had an ERA in the 2s, and that's amazing. But a lot of other things pointed that to kind of being lucky. His FIP was higher in the 4s, and his strikeout rate is low. When you look at relievers, two things you want to look at, strikeout and walk rate. His walk rate's okay. It's not great, but it's not bad either. But his strikeout rate needs to be a lot higher. And in fact, that's for his career, not just for the last couple of years. So he's not a high strikeout guy. And the other thing that gives me a little bit of pause is that he doesn't give up ground balls either. He gives up fly balls whenever opposing hitters make contact. Great American Ballpark's not exactly the best place to be a fly ball pitcher. So there are some things that I'm like, all right, I want to kind of temper my expectations a little bit, but objectively, this isn't even like, optimistic Jeff. This is objective Jeff. Looking at this, it's the best add that they've made to the bullpen in the last 3 years. And I think that bar's obviously kind of low, but yeah.
Well, we'll call him the best offseason ad they've made to the bullpen in the last 3 years. Let's not forget that they did add in Luis Castillo in the middle of the season. But just looking at his baseball reference numbers, you mentioned his FIP. His FIP was 3.67, an ERA 1.73. So you're right. He was a little bit lucky. He got into 35 games for the Milwaukee Brewers, pitched 36.1 innings. Strikeout to walk ratio, he struck out 38 while walking 12. So it's not horrible. It's not awful. It's not terrible. It's not Cianel Perez. Okay, there. I said it. I said it out loud. So
not Cianel Perez, think not Cam Bedrosian either.
Correct. I think for this time of spring training, with what this team will be facing when the season starts in just a few short weeks, I think these are the kind of signings that you need right now. Bring in a couple more arms, some people that have had some success, whether it was lucky or not, and hope that they catch lightning in a bottle a second time and can help this team in a month where they are definitely going to need some bullpen help.
No, and I agree. I think it's a good thing that they did this. I'm not poo-pooing it and saying that they shouldn't have done it, but I just don't want everybody to be like, we got our closer. We don't. Or ace of the bullpen. We don't. Our ace of the bullpen's Lucas Sims, and whenever he comes back, he'll be here. And Luis Castillo will kind of hold on to that in the meantime. I will say this, Tony Santillan should get back into the bullpen. That's going to help things out. And I like what I saw from Dauri Moreta today. He wasn't amazing. He wasn't perfect, but he did some good stuff because they asked him, they brought him in the third inning, which in spring training games, when a reliever is brought in means less than the actual result of the game itself. But when they brought him in, was against the teeth of the Dodgers lineup. He faced Justin Turner. He faced Freddie Freeman. He faced the big boppers there at the top. And he didn't look like he was fiddling on the mound. He didn't look like he was, over here, over there. He was hitting his spots. And I thought that he looked pretty solid to me. He had a really good fastball, of course, and then that breaking ball was pretty good too. I think it was a slider, but it looked like it had a nice little tight break to it. So I expect Dauri Moreta to be a pretty good player in this bullpen, probably by mid-season to be one of the higher leverage guys that they can kind of lean on a little bit. Now, who else steps up? Of course, that's a huge question mark, a question mark we have been attempting to answer all off season, but it's nice to have Hunter Strickland added to that.
No, I think so too. And to your point on Moreta, I think I texted you during that at bat with Freddie Freeman that he did not look scared at all. Nope. He did not back away from that challenge. And yes, I know it's spring, and yes, I know spring training statistics don't matter, but for a young guy like that, those at bats were important. Facing those batters were important because, where the veterans are just out there trying to get ready, some of these young guys are trying to find their confidence and trying to figure out how to be a major league pitcher. And from what I saw from him today showed that he's on the right track, and it was pretty exciting. As for the rest of the bullpen, I think we're still stuck in this put a bunch of names in a hat and, hope for the best. Hopefully that shakes out a little bit more, and I think it will. And I should know you and I will spend tons of time talking about it between now and opening day. But this bullpen is a big question mark.
Yeah. And a guy that I kind of keep forgetting to talk about a little bit is Art Warren. And I actually had a question on Twitter from somebody, and I forgot to pull it up, so I'm sorry that I forget who that was. But they asked me, is Art Warren the favorite to become the closer? I don't think he's the favorite. I think he's got the upside, and he maybe has a chance to kind of put his name into that conversation, but he's definitely not a favorite for that. However, you love the strikeout rate that he had this last year. It's just we didn't see enough of him. He didn't pitch a whole lot to the point where we know anything about him. So with that,
and I don't think David Bell's going to use a closer, Jeff. I think that he's going to do it by committee. I think that, there will be a clear-cut ace of the bullpen. We talked about it being Lucas Sims, and now for the short term, we talked about it probably is Luis Cessa. But I think that David Bell's going to go with the hot hand, and he's going to play the matchups. And that's how, we've talked a lot of times about this. I prefer it that way. I think it's a waste to just save your best pitcher for the ninth inning all the time. Use your best guy in the best situation. And I think that that's what David Bell will do.
I agree. And this is also kind of where I think of Reivar Sanmartin, in that I would like to see Nick Lodolo in the starting rotation more than him, because I think Sanmartin can add a very calm, left-handed presence in the bullpen, because Justin Wilson's there, but it feels like every third appearance, Justin Wilson can't really find the strike zone. And you don't like that. You don't want to, gamble with a reliever coming out and walking a bunch of people. So if you can add a lefty reliever to the bullpen like Sanmartin, that would be pretty good too. And also one other guy that probably when the trade went down, we were talking about him as possibly being a member of this bullpen this year, Justin Dunn. He ain't going to be, at least not till probably July. So just count that dude out right now.
And I'm glad you brought up that trade too, because one of the names that we haven't really spent any time talking about after the trade went down was Williamson, who came back in the Seattle Mariners deal. And I just want to, it's not that we're forgetting about him, but from what I've seen from him, looking at what he did last year, looking at what he did in his Reds debut out in Goodyear, I don't think he's quite ready yet. I think he's going to need a little bit more seasoning in the minor leagues. And just based on what I'm seeing, and nobody's really, other than Nick Krall, talking up the fact that he can contend to be on this major league roster. So I think he's going to start the year in the minor leagues. And I just wanted to make mention of him. And it's not that we're overlooking him. I just don't think he's quite ready for prime time.
And trust me, there's going to be plenty of Cam Bedrosian types in this bullpen, because like we said earlier, rosters are getting expanded to 28 players, and you can bet there's going to be at least 14 pitchers in that 28 player. There might be more. There might be 15 pitchers coming on this roster starting on opening day. And numbers are numbers. I don't necessarily think that means the Reds have a deep bullpen by any stretch of the imagination. It's pretty thin, because with all those question marks, you just don't know.
Yeah, this bullpen clearly lacks depth, Jeff, and they're going to have to overcome any injuries. And I think you hit the nail on the head a little while ago. This bullpen is dangerously close to being a repeat of the bullpen that the Reds rolled out to start the 2021 season.
I agree, Steve. So that's a bit of a bombshell. That's on that disappointment. It's time to end. Thanks for listening to this Locked On Reds podcast and watching this edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Coming up tomorrow, Steve and I are going to talk about a little bit more about Nick Senzel, because I want to talk about him a bit, because I like the things that he is doing in spring training, and his storyline is going to be a huge one for this Reds season. as 2022 goes along. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen, though. Now, go make Locked On MLB your second listen. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, is just knowledgeable when it comes to all things present and past in baseball, and he brings you a very unique perspective. Check it out, the Locked On MLB podcast, just like Locked On Reds, free and available on all platforms. Steve, spring training is trudging along. Opening day, where the Reds won't play at home, is coming up soon. What can everyone expect from us?
They can expect us to be Locked On Reds every single day. We'll see you tomorrow.